In our public Telegram group, there was a question around analyzing the EGLD or Elrond token. Now, if you're not yet part of the Telegram group, simply search for Bitcoin Strategy channel within the app. Let's have a look at a few charts. Of course, the EGLD chart with its best backtested moving averages. Let's look at relative valuations to Ethereum, to Avalanche, to Solana, so to other layer 1 competitors. Let's also look at things such as the inflation rate or the vesting schedule. So how is the liquid supply developing? Because supply and demand determines the price. So getting a feeling of where supply is going makes sense as well. But let's start off with the simple price chart with the EGLD price relative to Tether. And over here, we can see that we haven't yet crossed the best backtested exponential moving average here in red. Now with the premium membership, you get the best backtested moving averages for a variety of assets. For EGLD, that's the 4-day simple moving average and the 40-day exponential moving average. So those are the ones that worked the best in the past, right? So I've run simulations of buying and selling. You want to find out what's the best duration for a moving average. And we've done that simulation for all kinds of assets. For EGLD, it's the 40-day EMA and the 4-day SMA. We are not yet above the EMA, which is currently for EGLD at $55, a bit less than that. So once we cross that, historically, this would be a bullish sign. Now, what might be even more interesting than just looking at these indicators is to look at relative valuation. This here is EGLD relative to Ethereum. So not measured in Tether now, but in Ethereum. And why do you want to look at this? Because you regularly have a lot of correlation across assets, right? So let's look at Ethereum, for example, the US dollar chart, and at EGLD, the US dollar chart. See how the tops here for Ethereum and EGLD, they pretty much align, right? And the same is true for the bottom. Look at this bottom over here for Ethereum and at this bottom over here for Elrond. So cryptocurrencies tend to appreciate at the same time and they tend to depreciate at the same time. So in order to clean this up somewhat, right, and figure out what's actually the relative performance, we have to look at relative price charts. Even though we are interested in US dollar gains, we want to get the best risk versus reward, right? We want to buy something like EGLD because we think it might outperform something that's maybe less risky, such as Ethereum or Bitcoin. And this is the chart, right? This is not that positive since November of 2021, right? Quite a bit of an underperformance. So from top to today, an underperformance of EGLD by 74% roughly. But that's also because Ethereum simply performed very, very well recently. If you're just simply trying to allocate to a smart contract competitor, to a layer 1 competitor, and you're wondering what to choose, maybe instead of looking at something like Ethereum that has all the hype around the merge, maybe it makes more sense, or maybe it's more fair to actually compare this, for example, to Avalanche. And this is Elrond versus Avalanche. It's outperforming. Now, why is that? The inflation rate for Avalanche is pretty high at more than 20%. I think it's 23% or so. The EGLD inflation rate is lower. It's still high, but it is somewhat lower. It's at 14% right now. So every year, 14% more EGLD hits the market. And so when you've got that kind of an inflation differential and EGLD gets less new supply every year, then it can potentially outperform. Let's also look at EGLD relative to Solana. Pretty much a face-to-face, head-to-head race. So EGLD is neither very expensive nor very cheap versus Solana. They're pretty much moving in tandem. EGLD does also outperform Phantom, which by the way isn't that hard because Phantom in my opinion is pretty much a dying ecosystem. I used to enjoy playing around with the ecosystem. There were quite a few nice DeFi plays within Phantom. After Andre Cronje has left, it's very hard for Phantom to gain traction again, and so EGLD can also outperform Phantom. The same is true for EGLD versus Harmony One. I tried using Harmony One a few times. The experience was rather subpar. Feel free to check out other videos on this channel as well regarding Harmony One. The bridging process was pretty much a nightmare. And we've got EGLD relative to Cardano. And here we see in the recent past, EGLD tends to underperform Cardano. But we also see we are at neither any extreme value over here. And this is why I find these relative valuation charts so useful. We can really see at some points in time, one token is expensive and we might want to shift then over to another token, right? EGLD was very expensive, relatively speaking, in November of 2021. at a very similar valuation as in February of 2021. And so that's then when we want to probably exit the token and then move into something that might be comparatively cheap and could then outperform. So we can ideally ride those relative valuation waves, right? We can shuffle our assets from one altcoin to the next. By the way, if you're not familiar with this yet, you probably want to have a look at the relative valuation chart of Ethereum to Bitcoin as well. So that's this over here, right? We are currently very expensive historically with Ethereum relative to Bitcoin. Of course, no financial advice, right? But if you're looking for good risk versus reward, historically at least, it looks like Bitcoin tends to be comparatively cheap now. So if you're now 90% Ethereum, 10% Bitcoin, might make sense to maybe change this to 80% Ethereum and 20% Bitcoin, or even more Bitcoin, right? Whatever you are fundamentally more convinced of. But simply be aware, if you're getting into Ethereum now with all the hype around the merge, you're definitely not the first person that had this idea, and you might see people shuffling their funds again back to BTC. But that's Bitcoin and Ethereum, that's not Elrond. So let's go back to that. This is Elrond versus Polkadot. Not necessarily a lot of things that can be said around this. There might be a breakout at some point, but we're pretty much trading sideways with a bit of volatility. If we shoot up one day or shoot down one day, maybe it makes sense to make a very short-term counter position, simply because we see these short-term oscillations pretty frequently, but that's about it, right? I wouldn't overinterpret this particular chart. Now, 14.05% inflation. That's actually a simplification of the inflation rate. What we can actually look at is we can look at the liquid supply curve. And here we see how dependent on who's the stakeholder supply might hit the market, right? So these are unlocking tokens, and whenever this jumps up, the price of Elrond, at least relative to other cryptocurrencies, might drop. So you might want to have a look for the next unlock around the year end period, right? This is when the next unlock is happening. Currently, we are at 22.7 million roughly of tokens, and maybe in a year, let's look at that. In a year, this will be 27.5 million. So what's interesting is that this step function will basically stop by July of next year. So that's probably, if you're long-term bullish on Elrond, the point in time where you want to double down, because that's then when you're not necessarily having the problem with additional supply shocks anymore. Am I currently buying Elrond in this situation? I personally don't. I have other investments that I personally find more attractive now. The somewhat long-term underperformance versus Ethereum isn't necessarily that attractive. I look into smaller altcoins. I look into DeFi plays. I also look into trading bot programming. So if you're interested in any of that, then feel free to check out the premium membership, to be found at thebitcoinstrategy.com. There's quite a few investment ideas here. I share what I personally do. The cost is currently $75 per month. But if you've got $3,000 or $4,000 passively sitting on the side and you're willing to lock up that capital for a year, then with the knowledge of this premium membership, you can already recoup all of the cost, right? So this is not an expense for entertainment, but this is really an investment for growing your capital. If your crypto portfolio is less than $4,000, then of course, this is not necessarily worth it unless you're simply just interested in improving your skills. And of course, as mentioned at the beginning, there is still the free Telegram group. Simply search for Bitcoin Strategy channel within the Telegram app. Hope to see you in the video around the premium membership. Simply click over here, and thanks for watching this one. Bye-bye.